the trick.
Hello, I think we are live now, hopefully. So this is the BooktubeSFF Awards live show, hangout, whatever you want to call it. We wanted to do this to just like answer questions and stuff. So I am one of the hosts, Kaitlin from Kitty G, and then we have Elizabeth.
Hello. I'm Elizabeth, Books and Pieces, if you didn't know. So there you go.
And Lindsay.
Hi, I'm Lindsay from Lindsay Ray. That's my name.
And we got Nicole as well.
Hello, I'm Nicole from Nicole's Adventures in SFF.
So this is... And finally, we've got Thomas as well.
Hi. I'm Thomas from SFF 180.
Okay, so we're...
Hi. Did you not hear me?
Yes, I heard you.
Oh,
Sorry,
okay, all right,
my whole computer like froze, and I was like, "Please don't do this to me."
Awkward
But
silence.
I think
That's
we're
what
all
I didn't
good. I
know.
think we're all good now. So
Did I do it
hopefully it
wrong?
works. Hopefully it all works. So, who wants to kind of tell everyone like why we decided to start doing the BooktubeSFF Awards? Because I wasn't actually one of the people who decided that this was a thing. I just got invited. So Elizabeth and Nicole are probably the best people to talk about that.
I feel like I should probably start because I think it's my fault. Yeah, we did. We did the Hugo Awards discussion back when the shortlist was announced, and it was a very nice chat. And lots of people were chatting on Twitter afterwards, saying that was nice, and we should talk about more awards, and that, you know, isn't it interesting? And then I just went, we should do our own awards because that would be great. Because, you know, there's a lot of not so fun stuff going on with the Hugos this year, and I just thought, yeah, I see the point of celebrating other things and what our little community is excited by. And I said that and then emailed Nicole and was like, do you think this should actually be a thing? And then it was. Because she's very organized.
So I guess that'll take us into a little bit about how we decided to organize and structure the awards. So what we decided to do is to do like a popular vote right now during the nominations phase, which is open until the end of the month, until the end of June, and you can nominate. Yes, and you can nominate up to 2 works in each of 4 categories, and those works obviously have to have been published in 2014. But one of the things that we wanted to do to kind of be a little bit more inclusive of self-published things was we decided to make it so that books that were self-published prior to 2014 but then have since been professionally published by a professional publisher are now eligible again. So because a lot of times self-published works don't get up enough steam right away to be eligible, so we wanted to take that into account. Oh, and then the categories we have are Best Novel, which is sort of Best Adult or General Audience Novel, Best Young Adult Novel, Best Graphic Work, and Best Short Work. And there's things that explain all of this in much more detail if you want to check them out. So it's all on the ballot, which I'm sure Kitty linked, and also made a Tumblr page that goes through all of this. So then after the initial nomination phase, we'll release the short and long list, so everything that everybody nominated, and then the top 3 books from that will go on, and we'll have a read-along for them, and then as a panel of judges, which is the people you see here in this live show, we will select the winners. And I might also try a poll to see how it works for having everybody vote for the winner, but we'll see how that goes a little bit later on if we decide to do that or not. But yes, that is the basic structure. I don't know.
Yeah, no, and also if you want the more details and links and things, the best place to go to is BooktubeSFFawards.tumblr.com. Is that the right address?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Or the Goodreads group. The Goodreads group is a great place to
Oh, yeah, but all the addresses are on the Tumblr, and that's the one I can remember.
Fair enough, yeah.
Oh. So you can see how formal we are about all of this.
Yeah, no, one of the things that I was going to ask Elizabeth and Nicole was like, how did you choose who you wanted as judges?
There was not tons of discussion. We just thought about who was on BookTube, and we wanted people who were more fantasy and people who were more science fiction. So Nicole is quite sort of half and half, I think. That would be fair to say. Yeah. And I am fairly science fiction, and then I know Kitty and Lindsay are very heavily fantasy, and then Thomas, you could be both, and with a good history of science fiction behind you.
We also wanted people who could read fast, to be honest, because we're not sure what exactly is going to get nominated, and it's possible that we're all going to be starting some new series, to get caught up for the nominees. So,
to be honest, it nearly excluded me from my own idea, but people who we thought just out of on the top of our heads who read a lot and could probably be relied upon to do that, because
Oh.
But yeah, we tried to get a balance, because it's kind of hard, because science fiction is a little less popular, just a little bit, than fantasy. So we wanted to make sure there were a couple of representations of that, and I think between me and Nicole and Thomas, we probably weigh in as like 2 people at least.
Yeah, I think Thomas definitely counts as 2 people. You seem incredidly knowledgeable to me about it all.
I'm trying to lose weight, I promise. I'm working really hard on that. I've been going low carb, I swear. Yeah. It's just, one of those things. Well, I do try to, I like to sort of bounce back and forth between the two, but I have noticed that there has been an imbalance between, well, fantasy, I think, in so many ways is so much more accessible to, for example, the general reader. If someone who's never read either genre before, it's a whole lot easier to get them into fantasy than it is into science fiction, because fantasy deals with tropes that we're all familiar with, good versus evil, and rising to the occasion, and fulfilling your destiny, and these sorts of things. Very relatable concepts, and it has its own language, but it's the language of folklore that we grow up with, and that is sort of we get on an IV drip from childhood, right? So there are the dragons and the fantasy realm and these sorts of things, elves and all of the trappings of it. We're brought up with those, whereas in science fiction, you start talking about things like the singularity and Bose-Einstein condensates and all of these concepts of and all of this really cutting edge, deep think piece stuff, and it's a little hard to just sort of get someone in on the ground floor of that, and there's been a lot of discussion in terms of what would be good on-ramp science fiction for a completely untried reader, whereas with fantasy you can give them pretty much anything, right? Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, Narnia, whatever.
Lord of the Rings, not a good starter fantasy.
No.
I actually wouldn't say it is now either. I think that it's something that you should probably let someone get into as maybe a little bit down the road, as they've perhaps read something maybe a bit more modern, and then you go back and then you show them. It's like with films, right? It's like, okay, now that you have all your favorite movies, let's go take a look at Casablanca and Citizen Kane and all the formative stuff. But
I think the thing with science fiction, or one of the things with science fiction, is that I think if you look at the global, or let me just say at least the U.S. population, because that's what I'm familiar with, more people read science fiction. It's just within like the thriller genre. Like there's a lot of thrillers that have a very heavy sci-fi element, a very sci-fi light element, and so I think actually more people do read some science fiction than some fantasy. It's just we categorize it as thrillers because it's predominantly that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people read science fiction without realizing it's science fiction. It's just not necessarily known like that. Like loads of YA, dystopian, like YA, that's science fiction. That's all of you kids getting into sci-fi. Like, join us.
Yeah. And I think audiences are getting probably getting their science fiction a little less from reading than from other media, like television and film and video games. So they may be reading fantasy, but they're watching Firefly and BSG and all these others. So that's.
Well, they were 10 years ago.
They were. Yes, whatever is. Well, what's about to happen now? I guess. So we have The Expanse happening, Red Shirts happening.
An Orphan Black.
Orphan Black, right? So there's probably like a different input, different media for SF for most people.
Cool.
Although 70s was a top 10 New York Times bestseller last week.
Yeah.
So
Neil Stephenson is like probably one of those exceptional authors, though.
Right.
I did just pick up my first Neil Stephenson book, which
what did you pick?
I picked up Reamed, if that's how you say it. I don't know. Because that one sounded
Not
the most appealing to me. But yeah, it sounded the most appealing to me in terms of like it's about hackers and stuff. I was like, I feel like I can get in with that. That's okay. But I'm a bit intimidated by it because it's bigger than I thought it was going to be. But we'll see. Like, I want to get to it. I will also add, I've never read Lord of the Rings, even though I consider myself to be like really knowledgeable on a lot of the modern day fantasy. I hated Lord of the Rings. I read The Hobbit. I really liked it. I started reading the first one of the Lord of the Rings. I absolutely hated it, and I just I gave up.
It's not worth it. Don't do it.
No, I wouldn't advise people to read it. I think The Hobbit's okay, but anything more than that, no.
I'm exactly the same. I've never finished Lord of the Rings because I cannot stand it.
Yeah, I don't know what it was, really. I just felt like it was so boring.
Yeah, I finished it, but it was like trudging through the mud. Like, you have to read 50 pages today. You have to do it. Okay. Yourself to sit there. It was so painful.
I think that's the only way I would have got through it as well.
I'm one of the people who read Lord of the Rings like in middle school, and it was like one of my introductions to fantasy. So it's really strange to me to be like, oh, you hadn't read it until you were an adult? What madness is this?
Yeah.
But The Hobbit was like my bedtime story when I was a kid, but just Lord of the Rings is just...
It's got a very different feeling, I feel like. I feel like they're very different.
Trying to do something that at the time was very new, and he was really admittedly kind of fumbling through it. I think his brief was, okay, I want to give English literature, the equivalent of, of whatever the classic heroic epics like Beowulf and what have you, and he would, for example, if he was going along in the story and he didn't like the way it was going, he would stop, he would throw the entire manuscript out and go right back into a page one rewrite, and he did that several times with Fellowship of the Ring. So, he wouldn't just throw out a chapter or two or what have you. So he was really just sort of making it up as he went and kind of winging it. And you can tell, especially when we were reading the first book, he hasn't really got. He knows his world. He had been very thorough about the languages, especially. He was a linguist, so part of it was, I want a fictional vehicle for all of these invented languages I've done, the Elvish and the Dwarvish and what have you. But yeah, he was really just, the story itself doesn't really kind of take form and void until well into it. And most of the Fellowship of the Ring is, well, we're walking. And we're,
oh my God, they're walking with angst.
Yeah.
Walking with angst.
Yeah, and we're going to pause here and have a campfire and sing a whole bunch of mythic songs. And
yeah.
Yeah, so you can, but from a historical standpoint, it's interesting. You're sort of seeing modern epic fantasy kind of being molded out of clay right before your eyes, and so I think that's probably the reason to read Lord of the Rings these days.
It's funny that Lord of the Rings is kind of unreadable. You would not unreadable because lots of people read it, but you would never recommend that as beginners fantasy. But science fiction from the same era, probably very good beginners science fiction. Whereas modern day science fiction may be slightly harder to get into.
No, I would disagree with that.
Yeah, I think it depends on what you're reading. I wouldn't recommend Alfred Bester to someone as their first science fiction to read because he writes some really trippy stuff. Yeah. So
I was thinking Asimov and Paul and maybe a little bit Highline.
Yeah, I would probably recommend normally someone to read a space opera first, probably Old Man's War because I'm such a big Scalzi fan. But
Old Man's War is basically 50s sci-fi.
Yeah.
Like, I honestly read it and thought it was from the 50s.
But it has more, like, it's got contemporary language. You know, it's written kind of, it's the modern, homage to that era, and I think it's probably more accessible to readers in this decade. It used to be the thing up until very recently. Like, you would go to panels of science fiction conventions and always be, well, what do you get? What do you give someone to start them out? Like, especially teens, right? Kids. What do you give them to start them out on reading science fiction? And the stock answer forever was give them the Heinlein juveniles. And it's like, no, and it's not today, especially. I mean, even if you can barely tolerate them,
this is my favorite.
60 years
Science
ago.
fiction.
Yeah.
Oh, I so agree, Kaitlin.
Yeah.
Start place with science fiction. This
See,
book.
that is what you'd give someone today.
Yeah,
but
this is my recommendation.
But these books now, which used to be like the standard on-ramp, and now it's like these are the values and the writing and the thoughts from your grandparents' generation. So the teenager in 2015 isn't going to relate to the Heinlein juveniles in any way.
I was at a talk at EasterCon, and it was like we got quite involved in a discussion about Heinlein, and then somebody just stopped and went, actually, does everybody here actually read Heinlein? And half the room didn't put their hands up. And they were like, oh, is that not a thing anymore? And everyone was like, no, there's other stuff to read.
Yes.
Yeah, I've not read an awful lot of science fiction. I've read a few books, and it's something that I am steadily sort of getting into my routine a bit more, because I've read fantasy for so long that I love it, so I don't see a reason that I have to force myself out, but I think I will enjoy a lot of science fiction if I do pick it up. So I've been trying to find out the most popular ones today that I could just sort of squeeze my way in and see how they're going. Like, I read Leviathan Wakes and I really enjoyed that one, and obviously read Ready Player One, the 3-body problem. So I'm getting there. I'm starting The Martian next week, so I'm excited about that.
Oh, you'll love The Martian. Everybody loves The Martian.
Yeah.
That's a big current science fiction success story. So
yeah, I feel like that's a good one to go to next. So
Old Man's War.
Yeah.
I need to get to Old Man's War. Like Lindsay's been telling me this, and I do. I don't own any Scousey books yet, but I'm gonna get some.
But I've been finding this year I've been reading a lot more science fiction than I normally do, and I think I like it better than fantasy. I don't know what it is. And I've been reading a lot of urban fantasy. I'm finding I'm liking that better than high fantasy. So I don't know what it is. But I was telling them before you got here, Elizabeth, I am reading this right now. So I have 70.
Oh!
I am reading.
Exciting. That is his most science fiction-y book so far. Like, it's so science fiction. It's unbelievable.
It's so modern, though. There's like a reference
straight up hard science fiction. Yeah.
That was like the best thing ever, like referencing Dropbox. I'm like, who does that? I'm like, okay, I'm used to books referencing Twitter at this point, but Dropbox is like so specific.
I mean, I don't know if there are any questions, because there's some sort of strange thing on here that is supposed to track them, but I can see that people have commented on the video and it's not coming up, so
I think you need to look on the actual video as opposed to the...
I might just go to the video, and if you guys watching have anything that you want to say to us or want us to talk about, then definitely leave comments on the video, because I will be watching it.
Yeah, we got a bit distracted in the whole science fiction fantasy debate.
Or you can send them on Twitter or something, whatever you want.
No, but
on Twitter.
It's good to talk about this stuff when we're talking about, what should people read, and in terms of, try to get a roadmap for what the best work is in any good. Yeah, there is just quite a lot of good science fiction out there that is...
Last year was a really good year. It was a really good year for science fiction and fantasy. There was so much stuff that could have gone into every list. Yeah. It was like a bumper year, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, but maybe we should talk a little bit about what is eligible and not in each category, because we've mentioned the 4 categories, but I know some people have asked about or nominated the wrong thing, and some people have asked what's eligible, and so we should specify only stuff that was published in 2014. That's what we're judging on, is what was published last year, so that we'll award this year. And then if we do this again next year, it'll be what was published this year. So for best novel, there is a rule on length.
It's
Nicole,
over 150 pages was what we decided. So yeah. And I guess that's a little bit different. Most awards listed as word count, so we're going to be a little bit off because obviously page count is can be a little more flexible in terms of how the printer decides to publish the book. But we decided to go with 150 pages just because that's something most people understand. Like when you're reading a book, like word count can be a little bit
hard to work out.
Hard to tell. You just don't know.
We have no word counting machines, so.
No.
So we went with 150
that whole big
pages.
lab behind you, and there's no word counting machine in there.
Sadly not. I could probably write a program, but then I'd have to get like an illegal copy of the book to type word count so that I could have it on my computer.
That's not something we're advocating.
Here's something though. I think we have to talk about novellas because I see this as being like a real rising trend right now.
I may.
Tor.com is about to start up its novella line, which there are going to be there are several now that have been slated. They're going to be I think they're going to be sold as e-editions as well. They may or may not actually have them on the website as well. You can read for free. But this is a line specifically of novellas, and it's got its own editor and its own promotional push and everything. And the first few books look gorgeous. And there's a real thought of, okay, we all lead these busy, busy lives, and some people don't. Not everyone has time to sit down with a 600-page novel and bang through it. But novellas are good, and you get in, you get the job done, you get out, and novellas have always been a thing in magazines and what have you, but to be really focused on as this is like a legitimate new form, we're going to treat these as books and really try to promote this kind of, but not quite long form, short form writing, storytelling. For the mobile reading experience, they're great for the mobile reading experience, especially.
Yeah, I think a large part of that goes back to like self-publishing and how self-publishing has been kind of changing the publishing industry, because novellas are really popular with like independent authors and people who are whatever it is they call it when they self-publish some of their stuff and traditionally publish some other stuff.
Self-published authors, I think, is usually the term, but also it comes from like fan fiction, but also back in the day, like I've got Ursula Le Guin novels and they're barely 100 pages. Like, 101 pages maybe, but they're a fucking work of art. Like, they're beautiful books. And she can say as much in 100 pages as Game of Thrones says in 5 books. She's got, like, if you ever read Planet of Exile, it's basically Game of Thrones condensed into 100 pages. And it's magical. Good. The descriptions are fantastic. The concept is amazing, the story is amazing, and you can just whiz through it, and it's lovely, and it fits in your frickin' pocket, which I love, because you try carrying around Dance of Dragons in your handbag, it is not easy.
No, I've got the hardback edition as well, which is like ridiculous.
I just don't like short works. I don't know, unless they're published by one of my like top 5 favorite authors. If I read it, I almost never like it, ever. I don't know why, but the only ones I can
just haven't been a thing.
Novellas, I think, are really, really, like, for me, because I read high fantasy and, like, epic fantasy, and that's what I normally read, a novella feels so underdeveloped a lot of the time to me. And I find it very difficult to find an author who can convince me of this world in that much shorter. I mean, there are some people who write novellas that really interest me and I really enjoy, but as Lindsay said, like, they're my favorite authors, so I'm probably biased towards them.
I want both of you to read Planet of Exile and tell me what you think, because that would be fantastic compared to like Game of Thrones. Read it and just see what you think.
Yeah, I'm gonna write that down.
Yeah.
Well, it's also the epic fantasy crowd in particular have been trained for over 20 some odd years to think just 1,000 pages is normal book length, and that's what stories are. And so when you're used to that. Generally, you can hand somebody 100 pages, something that's 100 pages, and they're like, okay, well, this is the prologue, I get it, but where's the rest of it?
Yeah. It's difficult.
Okay, I read everything, so I don't think that applies to like how I read. I just really don't think
But some people.
about novellas I don't like. The only ones I can think of I liked are like by Brandon Sanderson, Scalzi, Rainbow Rowell. I would read it if Scott Lynch wrote it, and like that's like what I can think of. Everyone else I've read, I found it like so boring, and I can't get attached to it. I've added it to my list, Elizabeth, to read that one.
I feel like novellas that are like a kind of additional thing for part of a series or something like that. I love novellas that expand the world or expand a series, but I find it very difficult to have a novella that I just instantly connect with. I don't know if this counts as a novella or not, because P.T. Hilton, I think he's watching right now, so I'm gonna say it anyway. He wrote a novella or a short story, possibly, which is called Thorns and Tangles, I think. And I read that, and I legitimately, that was one that I did really like. So it's hard to get people who I really like and who introduce me to something and kind of convince me of it in a short amount of space. But there are some that do it. It's just, it's more difficult. I have to go into it being like, this is a novella. I've got to expect shorter, less world development, but maybe more awesome ideas or whatever the case may be. So, yeah.
I think you've got to think of it as like a small scene. Like, it should be an elegant, individual piece of art, like a little world in its own. You're just seeing a snapshot of the world, bigger than a short story, but not necessarily significantly more action or something, or like than you would see in a short story, just a bit more described and developed. It's a different thing than a novel, especially than a big epic fantasy 1,000-page sort of thing.
Yeah. And I think the problematic novellas are the ones that are written by writers who have a hard time with that. They're not sure. It's like, well, this has got to be longer than a short story, shorter than a novel, so am I just writing a really long short story or a very short novel? And they kind of try to split the difference somehow. Instead, and they're thinking in terms of short story or novel, and they're not really in the frame of mind that gets them into that place where they can treat the novella as its own thing.
Yeah, it used to be much more of a thing, and I think it's gonna come back. I think it's gonna be a big new thing.
Anthologies. Like anthologies, I find quite good, because if I'm not enjoying the novella, I can go straight on to the next one, and that way I've got lots of choice. And I think it's a good way of introducing you to an author. And like, there are authors who I would never have met or seen or anything if I'd not read an anthology. So I really like anthologies for that, and I think that they are a great way to get into novellas. I think looking up an individual novella is not something that I personally go out and do yet, but if it does become more of a big thing, then obviously that's something I might do.
Something that's going to happen more on a publisher basis, like you'd look up the Tor novellas and you'd look up the Penguin novellas and I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's the way to sort of introduce new authors, as well as like novellas are great for introducing newer authors.
Yes. I should point out, in terms of the awards, we're talking about this because it's the short fiction category is the under 150 pages, and more people should vote for short fiction because it is amazing. And if you are short of short fiction nominations, then there are many, many sources for it. Would anybody like to suggest their favourite sources of short fiction?
Tor.com. That's the only one I know, so I'm open to any suggestions other than that.
And you could just always look at what has ended up on some shortlists for this year.
Yes, other shortlists are great.
Yeah, not specifically Nebula's, the Locus Awards, that sort of thing. And that'll give you an idea of what, you know, the prominent, the stuff that's made an impression and that people are talking about in the field. You know, those works of short. Then you can find those. And what's nice about short fiction is a lot of it just gets posted online, and so you don't have to go out and buy an anthology or a book or even go to Amazon. You can, I think just about everything except for the two that were published as books. All of the two novellas, all of the Nebula short fiction, novella, novelette, and short story, they're all on websites. You can just you can find them, link them, and read them just right there on your browser. So that makes it easy.
Hey, Nicole disappeared.
Yeah, we've had a few comments and stuff on the video. If you guys would
like to see them now.
Like to hear them. So
yes, questioners.
We have a question from Mercedes. Although I'm not sure if anyone's going to be able to answer it until Nicole comes back because it's about
Uh-oh.
what works have come up, and I think she's the only one who has access to see it. So we'll save that one for when she comes back.
No, me and Nicole can both
can
see
you
it,
see
but
it as
we're
well?
absolutely forbidding ourselves from discussing it until after the ending because we could skew it. You guys feel free to suggest things, and everybody else feel free to suggest and discuss, but Nicole and I are gonna quietly absent ourselves from talking about it because we can actually see exactly what's been nominated and how many times, and I think that might unfairly skew things until the end of the nominations. Yes, we have been a little bit surprised with a couple of things. Well, I mean, I personally, but then maybe that's because my reading skews one way rather than another, but I won't say about what.
Yeah, keep it vague.
Wait, will you say what category has surprised you the most with what's been nominated between the 4 categories?
No, it's not been a category thing. There has been plenty of YA. I'm very pleased to see that, and I'm kind of unsurprised because it's BookTube and there's we got lots of YA people who are very good. I would like to see more nominations in short fiction. I definitely would. If anybody has anything they would like to promote or discuss, then if you've got any ideas and you want to nominate something, please do. But yeah, no, just more individual titles, I think. But I really can't say anything without making it so obvious.
Put you on the spot.
So
we won't say any more about it. It's fine.
Yeah, but I think it's better if we don't say anything. So
James has been commenting, but he's not put questions. He's just said that I should read Ian M. Banks, so I'm gonna do that. He's on my list.
I'm planning on doing that too.
Yeah.
Oh, I need to as well. I read Consider Phlebas years ago.
Yeah.
Phlebas?
Yeah,
Phlebas?
years ago.
How do you
Yeah,
say it?
Phlebas.
Phlebas.
I've always said Phlebas, but
I've never heard of it, so I don't know.
That's the first one of his culture novels, the first published.
Okay,
But the one that most people start with is Player of Games.
Is that the third one?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna start with that one because Nicole said to.
Yeah, Player of Games is probably the easier.
Not to start with the first one, so I'm gonna trust Nicole. Because I have no idea what I'm doing with that author. So.
It's on my list.
Yeah, it's on my list.
I'm just gonna I've got my phone next to me to take notes for you guys recommending. So I was I'm sure this is going to happen, that people will say something and I will forget it if I don't write it down. So that's my plan. He also said that he has Wizard of Earthsea, which he's planning to read soon. Which I feel like I have that as well somewhere, but maybe I don't.
Wizard of Earthsea is a great series, but it was really funny. Like, the first time I read it, I could not get into it. Second time I read it, could not get into it. Just hated it like 4 times. 5th time I read it, I just couldn't put it down. It was unbelievable. I started it 5 times. And then the 5th time, I just flew through the whole series.
Is that the Earthsea Quartet? Yeah, I can see it on my shelf, so I do have that one.
But that was like 12 years ago, so...
Yeah.
I might have to start it 5 times.
See, that's the whole key to Tolkien. You have to try 7 times, and on the 7th time, just blow right through the whole trilogy. It's perfect.
All right. I'll give it a few more goes.
Yeah.
We just say, Nicole, that we're not going to comment on what's been surprising nomination-wise yet, because it's still open, and we can see it. We don't want to
spoil
results. Results, yeah.
But if others want to suggest things and campaign for things and talk about things that might be great for other people to nominate, please do. That's fine.
Well, I think everyone should nominate Cress. So.
I haven't read Cress. I think it would be a bit unfair if I nominated it. I can't remember what I nominated. I've forgotten. So that's good.
It's kind of the one that's Cinder and
that's the Cinderella retelling, apparently.
So Cinder, Cinderella, and then Scarlet is Red Riding Hood, and then Cress is Rapunzel, and then Winter is Snow White, and that comes out in November.
Oh.
Yeah, I should start that series, even though
it's interesting seeing all
I
of
like the covers.
The young adult stuff at the Nebulas, the nominees for the Andre Norton Award. None of which were books that I was familiar with, but I've since gotten my hands on all of them, and so that's interesting. stuff that was completely off radar, at least as far as I was concerned. None of your expected best-selling YA writers were on it, but then again, it's a SFWA related award, and so it's probably going to be books that other writers are more familiar with, perhaps.
Where do I see the nominees for that?
I will tell you in moments, just seconds. Let me go back and look it up. But the winner,
Andre Norton.
Yes,
I found it. I found it.
The winner was Love Is the Drug by Alea Dawn Johnson. And
Don't know that.
So I've heard of half of these.
Yeah.
And okay, interesting. One of them I don't think deserves to be on there, but.
But so I've since gotten my hands on all of them, and I'll probably make my way through them just to see what.
What's on the list?
Those voters were.
So the winner was Love Is the Drug by Alea Dawn Johnson, Unmade by Sarah Reese Brennan, which is the third book in the Limber and Legacy series, is on there. Salvage by Alexandra Duncan. Gloria O'Brien's History of the Future by A.S. King, which I do really want to read. Dirty Wings by Sarah McCary. Green Glass House by Kate Milford. And then The Strange and Beautiful Sorrows of Ava Lavender, which I also really want to read.
Okay. Yeah, I actually really want to read The Strange Beautiful Sorrows.
And
the
all
Green
of these
Glass
are
House.
eligible for nominations in the BooktubeSFF Awards.
Yes, they are in the young adult best novel category.
So you got 10 days to blast through them, people.
Yeah.
This is really interesting what gets nominated for this. This is fascinating.
It's fascinating, the difference between different awards. So maybe we can talk about other awards people could look at and see if stuff that they know has been nominated in those. Because lots of people are saying, oh, I don't read current stuff. And it's like, it's not stuff that came out this year, but last year, and you might not know that it was eligible.
Yeah, I had to check out a lot of the stuff that I had read because I was like, I'm sure some of this must have come out last year, but I can't remember. So I went through my Goodreads shelf and I looked and I was like, that was fairly recent. Was that out last year? And there was actually quite a lot. So I didn't think I was like up to date with it, but I was with a lot of stuff. So.
And here are the young adult nominees for the Locus Award, the 2015 Locus Awards. Half a King by Joe Abercrombie. The Doubt Factory by Paolo Bacigalupi, Waistcoats and Weaponry by Gail Carriger, Empress of the Sun by Ian MacDonald, and Clariel by Garth Nix.
Oh, I loved those Garth Nix novels years ago.
Absolutely no overlap with the
I've heard Clariel's bad.
I've heard Clariel's horrible.
Really?
Yeah, I loved the Abhorsen series, like the trilogy, and I thought that was great, but I've heard that Clariel was bad, so I've not picked it up yet, which I'm a bit disappointed about. So
see, whenever I hear that everyone hates a book, that makes me want to read it more.
It's bad because it's boring, because it's a prequel, and I don't know. I think Garth Nix sometimes doesn't understand what his strengths are in writing. Honestly, that's how I felt reading Abhorsen, because I feel like he does not write to his strengths enough. But what's really interesting about these awards is I wonder what criteria is used to determine if it's YA. Like, it's really interesting because one year Zoe's Tale is nominated, which is by Scalzi, which is in the Old Man's War series. And so to me, just that series alone is like definitely like adult, but the main character is 16, or however old Zoe is. But I don't know. I wonder what criteria they use. I'm gonna have to look into that. It's really interesting.
Yeah. Oh, it's definitely a young adult story. I mean, I would say it's a young adult story. I would say that something like The Testament of Jesse Lamb is a young adult story. If you want to talk about, having a teen protagonist, and the whole idea is that, the young adult is the person who solves the problem, right? That's the
I think if a young adult is the protagonist and it doesn't get so sexy or violent as to exclude it from that category, obviously.
But that means like all 80% of the first book
every fantasy. Like a lot of this stuff behind me.
Name of the Wind, Mistborn, Way of Kings is questionable in ages.
Mistborn was remarketed as young adult by the publisher, so
it wasn't over here. It was still an adult.
But like,
but like Half a King over here is adult.
Yeah, whereas over here it's a YA, like definitely. So I find it weird that they're so different. But
I've seen Half a King marketed as
Name of the Wind. Something like Name of the Wind starts out as young adult, but quickly ages out. Like it
The
becomes
second book,
they get
not
old real
YA.
fast.
Like the second book is not appropriate.
Yeah.
Some scenes in that book.
Yeah.
And that's the same with a lot of epic fantasy. It starts young,
Yeah, and then it gets
ages out real fast.
Because
Yeah,
that's the cliche.
frozen.
Oh, the local farm boy is actually
Oh.
some long lost chosen one, blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm so bored of farm boys.
Yeah.
I sound like a
Can't
drag
get-
queen. So bored
Really,
of farm boys.
Elizabeth? Yeah.
I can't get enough of the young form, but I think that is proven. I love it.
Quote, I'm so bored of farm boys, Elizabeth.
Or just random orphans that aren't farm boys.
Yeah.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah.
He's not a farm boy, but he is an orphan.
that's true.
You know, you look at something like,
Parents
you know,
don't go well.
yeah. I guess it's just all, it's weird. Who knows how publishers choose how they'll market a thing, you know.
I have no idea.
For
Yeah.
years, for years, Ender's Game was sold as adult SF. It won its Hugos and Nebulas as adult SF, and then at a certain point, Tor shoved it into its YA line for reasons that should be obvious. And you know, the only thing I missed at the Nebula weekend ceremony that I would have liked to have seen, but I was spending the afternoon with a personal friend, because when you don't see friends for a long time, you do that. But there was one panel that I would have liked to have seen, which was specifically as a YA, the state of YA and YA criticism panel, and the entire panel was actual young adults, as in people not old enough to drink. So I would have liked to have seen that, because that would have been a chance to sit there and listen to actual teenagers talk about what we like, what we don't like, and
Yeah, that would be interesting.
yeah.
It's also partially like all of BookTube though. Like there's there
yeah.
are a lot of
That's true, but I think a lot of BookTube
Places
is
on-
actually like older than young adult. Technically, like I think a lot of people on BookTube look younger, maybe, but they're actually in their 20s, and you know, I don't know how.
Out young.
Yeah,
They start out young, and then it's been a few years, and now everybody's a little bit older.
yeah. I mean, I was 18 when I started, so now I'm 20.
Oh my god, how young are you?
20. I'm 20. I'm the youngest, I think. Like, everyone thinks I'm older than I am, but I'm not.
Such a waif.
We do have another question, so
Yeah.
you guys, it's aimed towards towards like Lindsay, Thomas, and Nicole, and it's
Okay.
talking about, because you guys read a lot of both genres, like science fiction and fantasy. Which ones do you prefer? Because you guys, I guess, have more comparison than I do when I'm a bit stuck in my corner.
As in, which genre do we prefer?
Yeah, I guess overall.
Science fiction or fantasy, the war begins.
Yeah.
okay, so mentally I would say that I prefer science fiction. Like I think I prefer it, but then when I like look at what I read, I end up reading more fantasy. And I don't know if that's just because like fantasy gets talked about more, and so there's more publicity around it, and so it's just in my mind more. But that's actually, it's something that I've noticed about myself that I find really interesting, that I think I like science fiction more, but I actually read more fantasy.
See, I'm like the opposite. Well, I do read more fantasy, but I'm the opposite in that, like, if someone asked me that question, I would be inclined to say fantasy. But if I think about not how many books I've been reading, but how I felt about what I've been reading, I think I enjoy science fiction more.
Ooh.
But I mean, I've been on an urban fantasy kick lately, like I've been saying. Like, I've been strongly preferring urban to high. Very strongly. So, I don't know.
I definitely go through phases as well, so I think everybody does. You go through a phase where you prefer a specific thing, because it's nice to have a little different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you want
go
to
through
change it up a
phases.
little bit. You know, keep it fresh. And I don't play favorites with either genre. I mean, what I search for first and foremost is just great stories. And I have just as much love for the epic space operas of Alistair Reynolds and Peter Hamilton as I do for the epic fantasies of, you know, George R. R. Martin and Scott Lynch and that sort of thing. They're very different books. Brandon Sanderson. They're different
They're
kinds of
all
stories.
big epics.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but they're But they're well told. If they're well told stories, then I get that enjoyment out of them. And that's what I really look for. What I love in SF in terms of like the specific trappings of the genre are, I don't look for those things in fantasy and vice versa. So each one scratches a different itch, I guess, and it's both valid. But it is good to change them up. I find that if I'm reading too much of one or the other at a given time, I find myself getting a little weary of it. And I need to, it's like, okay, that's 4 fantasies in a row. I need a space opera stat.
Yeah.
And, it's just keeps it fresh.
I talk about science fiction a lot, but I do read a fair bit of fantasy, and it was really funny. Somebody asked me for some audiobook recommendations the other day, and I went through my Audible list, and I was like, oh, these are all fantasies. Like, other than... I think it went back to The Martian and World War Z, but other than that, it was all fantasy. And it was like, this is really weird. Like, why is all my Audible stuff all fantasy? But apparently I like fantasy stuff in my ears.
I feel like I'd get confused with science fiction listening to it. I feel like it would be more difficult for me to follow science fiction if it was like hardcore science fiction.
I intentionally pick things that are less complicated when I'm listening to them, because I know I can't handle like really complicated plots or like really technical jargon when I'm listening to something, in part because I'm normally doing other things. So if it's something that I like have to focus 100% of my attention on, it's just not going to happen. But yeah, I tend to pick more like mysteries and to some extent like nonfiction, like humor and stuff, and more urban fantasy and more like space opera for my audiobooks, because those are a little more plot-driven and straightforward, and it's easier for me.
Yeah, I think what Thomas was saying about like mixing it up, I do read nearly exclusively fantasy. Like, I will admit, I am very, very biased towards fantasy. I love it. But in terms of mixing it up, because I read so many big, massive books and I love them, I obviously need a break every now and then. So I am really into graphic novels. Graphic novels for me are the thing that I will put in between gigantic books so that I can read them and have like a really light, fun read, and then go back into a massive epic fantasy after that.
We've had a few questions. Okay.
Go for it.
Sorry. No, just, Lindsay, do your thing, sorry.
What? Oh, I just gonna say I'm so all over the place. I can't. I don't know if I'm reading that way. I don't know. What am I reading right now? I'm reading a sci-fi thriller, a long science fiction book, a mystery, a graphic novel, and I'm about to start a YA contemporary.
Yeah, so you read all the books, like all the books.
Yeah, didn't you just read like over 150 books?
Yeah.
Oh my god!
I don't know how you do that. I mean, I've read 90, so I'm really happy with that. Like, I'm
so behind.
I cannot believe you guys. That's amazing.
At least we met your criteria for being judges.
I have my goal.
Okay, I guess I obviously need to up my game here really bad.
Yeah.
Audiobooks. That's how
audiobooks, definitely.
I listen to so much audio.
Yeah.
I do like audiobooks. It's a good way of reading a lot of stuff without having to be doing things, you know.
Yeah.
I get to do other things like cleaning and traveling to work and read. Okay, so we got what? Somebody asked if I have a beer. Yes, I do.
I should hope so.
I have Colorado Red by Thornbridge, because I'm in Bakewell in Derbyshire for the Eroica Festival. I don't know how you say it, Eroica. It's a vintage bicycling festival. Anyway, Thornbridge, the brewery, I'm going to get sponsored by them. They're based around the corner, so it's lovely. But yes, so I do have beer. And somebody said...
And you will have wine.
James Eagle. What are your guys' opinions on the Belgariad, YA or adult? Anybody read it?
I haven't read the Belgariad, but my boyfriend is reading it right now. So I've heard from him quite a lot about it, and he said to me that like he's read a fair amount of high fantasy and stuff that I read, and he said to me that it definitely feels YA to him. It feels like it's YA, but that might be because it was written quite a long time ago, and so the standard of fantasy becoming more and more dark and more gritty, like over time, that wasn't a thing back then. So it's fairly standard fantasy, I think. I don't think it's meant to be YA. But I think by today's standards, it could fall into YA from what he's told me. So I haven't read it myself.
I think it's whatever section it's sold in the bookstore, honestly. I'm like really sensitive about this. I actually have a video that's going to come out eventually about this. I filmed it like 6 weeks ago and I'm too scared to put it up. But I think it's whatever section is sold in the bookstore, and I don't like it when it's saying like things like feel like YA or feel like adult, because I feel like there's some weird implication there. That it like that.
I want you to put this video out.
Yeah,
put
I think you should
too. I don't know. Sana and Sarah and Sam, I think I had them all watching. They said it was fine and that wasn't going to offend people. But
do it. I want to watch it.
Okay.
It's fun to upset people, though. I mean, it's
yeah. You enjoy it though. You like it though. I've seen your tweets about the puppies. Not that they don't deserve it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, I would just like to say to James Eagle, yes, Aragon, however we saying that book's title. Yes, that was poor, but I also read it and liked it when I was a kid.
I loved it. I
have it on my bookshelf. I've not read it yet, so
I loved it.
I actually have the first 3 in that series, so hopefully.
Stop after 3.
Talk about being tired of farm boys.
Dragons. That's what I need in my life. Lots
I remember
of dragons.
Thinking that it was like a fun YA, but even back then when I was a teenager, I could recognize that it was totally like a real easy kids copy of another book.
It's Star Wars and the Lord of the Rings universe.
Yeah.
So I hadn't read much fantasy at the point that I had read Aragon. So like to me it was like very new feeling. My friends, I guess, what are your 3 influences? Like Lord of the Rings, Wheel of Time, and something else. And she said that she had read those beforehand, so it felt like those 3 books for her. I don't remember what the 3rd one is. But no.
Definitely Lord of the Rings. Something with dragons. Pern, probably.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah, that would make sense. Anyway, okay. Did you guys answer any of the questions that we had beforehand while I was disappearing? Probably not.
No, we've been answering questions from the YouTube, but that's it. So if you want to go ahead for other questions, go for it.
Somebody complained on Twitter about not seeing the elephants yet. I'm sorry. Elizabeth, I promised you that you would be doing a big musical number. I hope you don't mind.
I'm not at home, so I haven't got my costume box. So I'm kind of lacking.
We will have costumes for the announcements and stuff like that. We will definitely have costumes then. Even I will be getting a costume.
The actual awards show, there's going to be glitter.
Yeah.
There's going to be a lot of glitter.
Oh, my.
And music. I'm going to get us to rehearse a coordinated dance number.
Oh, God, that will go poorly.
None of these guys know it yet, but...
Could you imagine?
It'll be like...
We've got to do it in this little box space as well. That's the problem. We've only got this box to do it.
I'll see what's around. If I can come up with a costume, you'll see it.
Okay.
So, anyway, about nominations, I guess I'll talk about that really quickly. So, I've been doing posts on the Tumblr that update or talk about nominations that have been nominated in the wrong category or which were incorrect year, basically, is the other thing. So you can check that if you're concerned about your nominations, because anything that's incorrect will be there. What happens is if you have a nomination that is...
Sorry.
What is that?
Elizabeth. It looks like a sheep.
What?
It's a sheep. Shaun the Sheep, yes. Classic.
I don't know what that is. Is this a British?
No.
Yeah.
Disappointing. Yeah, it's kind of like, do you know Wallace and Gromit? They're like
Yes.
made models and stuff. It's kind of like that, but with sheep.
Okay then.
Yeah,
Great.
it's called Shaun the
Let's-
Sheep. You
let's
can probably
get
look it up.
Yeah, sorry, go on.
Let's get a few more of those beers into you, and then let's see what costumes. from...
Yeah, sorry, Nicole. Onwards.
Yeah, sorry, ignore me, please.
So if it's the incorrect year, then I've just been dropping the problematic nomination and carrying over the rest of the ballot to be tallied. But you can go back in and edit your ballot and change it. So if you see something that you nominated that's incorrect, you can go back in and edit it to have something that would be correct. So it's still, you can still go in and change your nominations if you realize that something was the incorrect year. If something is nominated in the wrong category, if there's room, I just move it over to the correct category. If there's not room, then I'm just dropping it as well. So it might be worthwhile to check those posts and see if any of your nominations were in the wrong category. So especially because of the thing we've been talking about with the young adult and adult novels, it can be a little bit hazy, and sometimes you just kind of had to like pick one and say, this is where you're going to go. And then a couple of things that people specifically asked about. So the Slow Regard of Silence things we are counting as a best short work because the book ends on page 149, but then there's 10 other pages which are an author's note, so we're counting it as best short work, along with, what's it called? The Strange Library by Haruki Murakami. There was some confusion about that one. That one I'm also counting as best short work. I think people were curious if it was best graphic work and best short work.
Well done, keeping a straight face.
I'm really sad I don't have things like props with me. I didn't realize.
Patrick Sloth.
Is that a crow?
His name's Patrick Sloth.
Patrick Sloth. I love it.
Mm,
I've got dogs.
That's
but
very
that's about
cool.
it.
I have bacteria.
Oh, bacteria, you know.
Yeah.
Wait, no,
it
big
coli
fluffy
or something,
ones
or
or
it's like-
actual?
Yeah, I'm in lab. Yeah, I think I just have E. coli in here right now.
Oh, lovely.
Brilliant.
They're not pathogenic. They're the like
Yeah,
people
like
use E. coli for everything, and
everything.
yeah.
Oh, I thought you meant the fluffy toy one. Do you mean the actual
Do you mean she has
bacteria?
coli in there?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm in my lab. I'm in actual bacteria.
Did we mention Nicole is handling the catering for the BookTube?
Oh gosh.
So, were there any other questions, or is that it, Nicole?
That's pretty much all the questions I've had. I don't know. Have you guys had any questions on your videos or anything
Well,
about like?
I had. Is Cress okay to nominate? Yes, it is best YA Sci-Fi 2014. So yes, you can nominate Cress. Nominate Cress.
Yeah, the only ones I had were about Slow Regard of Silent Things, and Nicole covered that very neatly.
Yeah, I don't think I had any on my channel, and I think we've answered the ones that were posted in the Goodreads group. So if you want to think of like questions after this live show's done or whatever, and you know something pops into your mind, then the Goodreads group, we're all on there, so one of us will answer your question if you have a question later on. I think we had a few like asking about sort of whether we were going to cover sort of general backdated books, because obviously we've only started it this year, and some people were thinking that there were a lot of books that weren't going to get included because they're new releases and things. And I think that's something we could think about, but like we said on the Goodreads group, and we said in some of our videos, that this is the first year. We're trying it out, we're seeing how it goes. If it's successful, then if there's stuff that you guys have ideas about, then we will try and incorporate that if it's something that we continue to do yearly. But at the moment, we're just sort of sticking with the 4 basic categories, so we know what we're doing, you know what we're doing, and it all works for everyone, hopefully.
Yay.
I think the idea of doing a backlist thing would be cool, but I also think it would be really difficult to like actually,
It would
in
be
terms
hard.
of organization.
There's so many books out there.
And I think it was just, it could happen once, and that would be great, and then every year it would be the same frickin'
Yeah.
books.
Yeah, exactly. Just your favorite books remain your favorite books generally. So
Yeah, it would be hard to regulate that as well. Like, we'd just have the same stuff. So it would be difficult. There's so much out there that is worthy of awards and hasn't been given an award or whatever the case may be. But to cover all of it, it would be impossible. So it's a hard thing, but something we can think about in the future if it's something you guys want. So we'll see what happens.
But I want to encourage people to read new stuff too. I mean, you know, we get stuck in this kind of cul-de-sac of our old favorites, and I think one thing that would be nice about these awards would be if it would encourage people to maybe seek out recent things and some new up-and-coming emerging authors that you haven't tried before, and who would certainly love to, you know, that's the hardest thing in the world when you're a new author, to kind of build your readership, and so that would be great for them, and you'd probably discover some really cool stories.
I think the thing about sci-fi and fantasy that's like really unique compared to other genres is I feel like when you're new to reading sci-fi and fantasy, there's like this need to like legitimize yourself and like read like this
the classics,
list of books that like everyone's read for the purposes of like, I don't know, just feeling like you can talk in conversations because like everyone's read them who's been reading sci-fi and fantasy a lot longer.
I mean, don't feel like that. If you feel like that, ignore everyone. It's fine, and they're probably old.
Honestly, I would rather see people picking up new stuff in the science fiction and fantasy genre and talking about brand new books that I've never heard of and that just interest me, because I have read a lot of the old stuff, and like, I don't want to be constantly recommended loads of old stuff that like everyone has an opinion on. So when I put up a review, everyone's got an opinion. I'd rather introduce people that are my viewers to new stuff, and I'd rather that other people introduce me to new stuff, because I feel like it gets very saturated with this is something you have to read. And the amount of people who've commented on my video saying, have you read Lord of the Rings? I'm like, please, no. No, I haven't. Go away.
People comment on my Lindsay Recommends Adult Fantasy video from like September and be like, why isn't Lord of the Rings in here? Why isn't this in here? Well, that's not a good introduction to fantasy. I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry.
Even if it is,
it doesn't have to be on every list.
Yeah, and I put up like recommendations all the time, and it's like people are like, "Why is this not on here?" And it's like, "Well, because it's not my recommendation. Like, this is my favorites." Like,
I got that question, you know, back even long before I started the channel, and I was just doing the website, because on the website I review a combination of old and new things, right? And you know, the question is, you know, well, where are the Tolkien reviews? And the only Tolkien review I've actually done was of this thing that came out a few years ago that was like this, the Children of Hurin, which was which, by the way, was fascinating for me, because it's like a straight up Shakespearean tragedy. It is dark, it is grim dark. It makes Joe Abercrombie look like Mother Goose. It's so dark. You know, Hamlet would talk to the main character of the story and say, "Dude, how can you? I can't even." So that was kind of a surprise to me. But we get a lot of questions. So where are your Lord of the Rings reviews? And my answer was simply, look, there are the only two ways you can approach those books. Either you review them. If you don't review them as, you know, these symbols, as the Godfather, you know, the starting point, the Godfather, from their standpoint of their historical importance. If you don't review them from that perspective, you're missing the point. And if you do review them from that perspective, you're not saying anything new that hasn't already been said in 10 million master's theses and doctoral dissertations and whatever other literary. So there's nothing new to say. And so why bother? You know, yes, I read them when I was a kid, loved them back then. I'm done with the Tolkien. I want to concentrate on other things now. 40,000 other new writers that I would rather read their stuff and bring that to a new audience. You know, and when I started the channel, I decided the channel was solely going to be focused on new release stuff. So my two things are the Mailbag Mondays, which are always, you know, here's what's newest. And then thank you. And then any review I do is going to be a new release title on the channel. I'll still review, because I've got them sitting around the house, for God's sake. You know, I want to read them and get them out of here. I'll still review older books, but those will be strictly the website and, you know, a little note on Goodreads or something, but not on the channel.
Something I've always wondered about your house, Thomas, is like, do you have any space, or do you just have books everywhere?
No,
because like you get so many books each week, I wouldn't know what to do with them. If
I showed you the rest of this room right now, no, I am honestly contemplating like a climate-controlled storage unit for a lot of these. It's crazy.
I can recommend salt mines.
Yeah. Oh, all right. And it's crazy because I've had to do a lot of triage. I've decided that my permanent library will pretty much just be the hardcovers that I really, really like. Other things will either go to libraries or friends. The ARCs get read and immediately given away to friends. I try to get them out of here quickly. And anything that's maybe a mass market paperback, read it, get rid of it. You know, those are kind of meant to be disposal.
I don't understand this. What the fuck? Why do people like hardbacks?
I don't know.
I hate them.
They're just, yeah.
I
like this little old-fashioned size of paperback.
They look awesome on shelves.
Yeah, I like them as an object.
Yeah.
They look nice. I like them as an object. I actually prefer to read on my Kindle, so...
They just take up space as an object. Look how many tiny little paperbacks I can get for one giant hardback. So convenient. And
Well, you know, my thinking was, yeah, they take up space, but then it would be like, well, what else would I use the space for?
More books.
I mean, what else do you want to? Yeah, what else do you want to put in the room? You know, if you don't have books, what else is there to put in it?
I think they're a much bigger deal in America as well. Like, America seems to have hardbacks a lot more than the UK. The UK stocks a lot more paperbacks generally than hardbacks, whereas it sounds like from various people that I know in America you get a fair balance or more hardbacks maybe even.
Well, a lot of the books that come out in paperback, we cannot get in paperback unless we order them from the UK or wait a year.
Yeah.
They come out in hardback and you can't get the paperback for a year.
Yeah.
A money thing.
Yes, Ed, that's another thing. Yeah, the UK publishers do this sort of simultaneous hardback and paperback release thing frequently, and they don't do that here in the States.
I'm so happy that they do that, because I could not afford hardcovers all the time. That's just not going to happen.
Well, I certainly couldn't either. I mean,
I want more publishers to do the smaller print, smaller margins, smaller books. That would be much better. Just a personal plea.
Do you realize how small the print would have to be to get a Neil Stephenson book into a book that thin?
Yeah, that would have to be like...
Yeah.
Yeah.
And with,
yeah, he's never going to get that small, but it could be smaller.
James asks, has anyone read Bloodsong by Anthony Ryan? I've read Bloodsong. Tower Lord stares at me, but I haven't read it yet.
Nope.
They're on my bookcase. They're behind this rare books, because all of my books are double stacked, so yeah, they're on there.
Who is this person?
Anthony Ryan?
James.
No, not James. Who's Anthony Ryan?
Who's Anthony Ryan?
Bloodsong's his debut, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, it is. He wrote Bloodsong whilst he was still working.
Bloodsong came out in 2013, and then Tower Lord came out in 2014, and then the final book in the trilogy is coming out this year.
Coming out next month.
Yeah, it's kind of told like Name of the Wind in that storytelling structure. If you've read that,
yeah,
and it's a coming of age, darker.
I loved Bloodsong. I did not like Tower Lord.
Don't tell me that. I'm trying to get myself to read it in a week.
No, I loved Bloodsong. I didn't like Tower Lord. I
Damn,
thought
those
that Tower Lord was completely
reading.
different. Yeah, I don't know what it was about. Well, Bloodsong is told, predominantly focused around one character. And it's a really well-done book, and it focuses on him really well. And I loved his story. And then the second book branches out, and it includes a lot more different characters. And some of them are interesting, and a lot of them were not as interesting as his story would have been to me. So I was like, I wish you'd kept the same style as the first book, because it just didn't work for me. But then I do know people who prefer the second one as well, so it goes both ways. I think if you like lots of characters, you might prefer the second one, whereas...
I thought the first one had some major flaws, but I still want to read the second one. I don't think that Anthony Ryan has as good of a grasp on unreliable narrators and narrative voice as Patrick Rothfuss does. And so there's like times he would conceal information from you, and it'd be weird. It bothered me.
Okay, guys, I feel like we're chatting random stuff, which is great, but we should probably wrap up on the whole awards thing in case anybody is watching and thinking we're going to say anything relevant for a bit.
Yeah, we might.
Yeah, if you're looking for relevant...
Go and vote. That's what
Not
I
saying
think.
anything
Go and
Yeah.
nominate your stuff. Like,
Yeah,
if
do
you've
it.
not done it yet, then do it, because there's 32 of you watching who I know maybe you haven't all nominated stuff. So if you have, then good. If you've not, please go and nominate. And if you've nominated something wrong, go and change it.
Yeah. We're
If you
looking
can.
at you.
Otherwise, I'll just drop it.
That's right.
Yes. And just anybody who is watching this who hasn't voted, vote. Please vote. It would be great. We just want to know what you love. Just stuff that you loved. It's just, we want to like celebrate what BookTube's loved. And we'll send them a tiny, hideous plastic trophy and it'll be hilarious. I have many tiny, hideous plastic trophies that I bought.
Mm.
Okay. We good?
Yeah.
That's yes.
I think that's it. I think we've said everything on the
Have we
BookTube SFF.
exhausted everything?
If we get any more questions on it, like, that's fine, but
We'll
I think
answer
we've
them.
covered it all.
Let's finish off by saying what's going to happen next, just to round off in case anybody wasn't here at the beginning. So nominations are open for the rest of the month up until the 30th of June, so you've still got 10 days. So 10 days to nominate and read exciting things from last year. And then in July, at some point in July, when we have spent some time on it, we will release the shortlist and the long list. And then we will start read-alongs. So if you want to do all the exciting read-alongs, it's going to be like the top 3 things of science fiction and fantasy that BookTube has loved, which will be great for the next 3 months after that. And then we're going to do the awards show, which everybody's really excited about.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm.
When is the awards show? November?
November-ish.
Yeah, November-ish.
Yes.
Sounds good.
We don't have the date yet, but we will.
Yeah. Look out for it. But yeah. Yeah, so nominate now, and you could make us say the name of your favorite book in November.
We might be talking about your favourite book if it is one of the ones that was most nominated, but it won't get nominated the most unless you put your votes in.
Yeah.
That's right. If you don't vote, don't complain. All these other things that they say to guilt people into participating in and stuff. That's why you just keep the conversation going, because that's what BookTube ought to be about. It's a community. Let's do community things. Let's, talk amongst ourselves and enjoy doing it. Just have big book discussion.
That's it. We wanted to inspire a bit of conversation about what it is that we all love, and I think that's been happening. It's been really interesting.
That's right.
Okay.
Are we going to continue talking, or are we going to go off air?
Go off there.
Okay.
So that's it.
Yeah.
Thank you all for
I
coming.
got stuff to record now.
Bye.
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 You're still